listening to the Ohio Baseball Weekly Show with your hosts, Dave Mitchell and Martin Donahue. Tune in every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Ultimate Sports Talk Radio Network.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to another Monday night, and that means it's time for the Ohio Baseball Weekly Show. I am Dave Mitchell, and alongside as we talk about the Cincinnati Reds and the Cleveland Indians as we go through spring training out in Arizona, alongside is my resident Reds expert, the hero from Wright State, the man that can dunk a basketball, Mark Donahue. Good evening, Mark.
I can only dunk in my dreams now, David. But, you talked about spring training, and this may be known in forever as the longest spring training of all time. It seems like we've been in spring training now for, a couple of years, but that's because of the World Baseball Congress, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, we certainly are, but we've got a guest coming up for everyone tonight, and that's going to be Sean Weaver. Sean Weaver is the head of Sean's.blogspot.com, and he talks about the Cincinnati Reds. He's going to be our guest coming up here about 9:20 this evening, so stick around for that. And if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask us here this evening, feel free to do so. You can email us at askus@ultimatesportstalk.com or dmitch@ultimatesportstalk.com. You can also tweet us something, and that is at @altsportstalk or at OHBB co-host. So we're glad to have you along this evening. Stick around as we talk about the Reds and the Indians for the next hour. But, Mark, I love this time of year. I mean, not only is it spring training, the baseball is back out, and we're getting ready for the beginning of April, spring, cutting through the winter months, but also it means March Madness is here, and that brings us into something that it may not be involved with baseball entirely, but the Miami Hurricanes out of Florida, they're in the NCAA tournament coming up starting on Thursday night, Mark, and it's got a little Cincinnati flavor to it with Shane Larkin.
Yeah, I saw him play a couple of times, and frankly, he's a lot better than I thought he was. He's got some real skills, and I was happy to hear that he was going to be sticking around for his senior year because I think he can be a first-round pick next year.
Yeah, Dick Vitale actually said yesterday that since Larkin had announced that he was coming back, that his All-Star team next year, All-American team, would consist at the beginning of the year of Aaron Kraft of Ohio State and Shane Larkin at the other guard.
That would be great, and I think Larkin is, he's obviously his father's an intelligent guy, went to Michigan, and they certainly have the financial resources, so this kid doesn't have to run into the NBA and make his mark. So I'm glad he's going to be staying put and getting his degree. And I don't care who you are, how good you are in college. If you leave too early, something happens. I keep thinking of that kid from Duke, and the guard from Duke, the All-American. He was a first-round pick. I've forgotten his name now, and I wouldn't have forgotten his name had he played. But remember, he graduated from Duke or left Duke. First-round pick, and injured his knee in a motorcycle accident and never played.
Jay Williams.
Was it Jay Williams? I forgot his name.
Yeah,
but
Jay Williams.
Stuff happens, and for all the kids out there, you can't plan on anything, folks. You've got to understand that college degree is worth so much as you get older in life, and even today, advanced degrees are something you ought to shoot for.
Yeah, that was one of the proudest moments I've had as a father, Mark, is watching my two sons graduate from Hiram. But, you look at Shane Larkin out there playing. He was the most outstanding player of the ACC tournament. And you watch Barry Larkin up in the stands. I think he was more nervous watching his son than he was during the World Series in '90.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I remember, when you play sports, I never played at the professional level, but I played at the college level. And you really don't get nervous during the game, but I remember watching my son played tennis in college and high school, and I'd be a nervous wreck watching him play. I couldn't sit still. Your stomach turns, and it's different when you're watching your kids play.
Yeah, my oldest son, Greg, was a football player at Hiram, and I was just on pins and needles out there watching him play. And then Patrick was the student assistant basketball coach at Hiram for 4 years. And even though he wasn't playing, I was still involved with that team to the utmost. And again, here I am sitting on pins and needles, and I'm not the most excitable guy at all anyway. So just being involved with those two, and that was one of the reasons, Mark, that I had to leave the play-by-play profession. I knew there was absolutely no way I was ever going to be able to do a game, broadcast a game with those two in it.
You know, that's interesting, and as you were talking earlier about this is a great time of year because of all the sports going on, name for me right now the sports that are going on.
Oh, you've got the NBA and college basketball. You've got NHL hockey. You've got golf going on. Baseball's happening. Even though football is not playing, it's still in the forefront because the draft is coming up in about a month. Let's see what else.
Well, you probably know the answer to this trivia question, but I'll give our listeners a chance to respond to us by the end of the broadcast. You mentioned 4 sports, major sports that are going on right now. What time of year is there's 4 days where there are no major sports going on?
That is an interesting question.
There's not one, there's not football, there's not basketball, there's not baseball, there's not hockey, there's not football, anything going on. There's 4 days of the year, in consecutive days, that nothing is going on.
And what are those days?
Well, I think we ought to give our listeners a chance to respond to that.
Okay.
And I'll give you the answer at the end of the show.
Okay, yeah. So if you've got the answer to that, feel free to give us a tweet or give us an email at dmitch@ultimatesportstalk.com, or you can tweet us at OHBB co-host there on Twitter. But we are also proud to announce tonight that the Ultimate Sports Talk website is partnered with our affiliates to unveil the first annual NCAA Bracket Challenge. So sign up now for your spot in the challenge by going straight to our website at www.ultimatesportstalk.com and clicking on the March Madness logo. Remember to use our group code, which is UST for Ultimate Sports Talk. Use that code UST when signing up and making your picks. Now, the top 3 winners in this year's competition will receive gifts courtesy of Ultimate Sports Talk, Mark Donahue, and our affiliates. The top winner will win a $50 gift card to Best Buy, Olive Garden, AMC Theaters, or GameStop. And the second place winner is going to win Mark's book, Last at Bat, which is going to be soon a feature motion picture. So what are you waiting for? Just head on over to UST, UltimateSportsTalk.com, to sign up today. Mark and I are not eligible to win, but just for the heck of it, Mark, who do you say will win the tournament?
I like Louisville.
Boy, and here I thought we were going to have an argument.
You like them too?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I mean, they are playing so well, and I saw them on TV the other day, and I'll tell you, and it's a surprise because at the beginning of the year, I didn't see them, coming together like they have by the end of the year. But I'll tell you, the other team that is playing so well is Ohio State. I mean, they've really come around. I thought they would be completely out of it, maybe not even make the tournament by the middle of the year, and here they are, have a chance to win the darn thing. And the way with Indiana is playing, they've leveled off. So, I think it's pretty much wide open. It's interesting because so many players leave after their freshman or sophomore year. There's no longer a dominant team that would have like a Shaquille O'Neal or someone like that could lead a college team to a Final Four victory. These teams are made up many times of sophomores and juniors, and not many seniors. So you have, number one, a quick turnover. You have teams rebuilding quickly, but you don't have that dominant team anymore. It's parity. It makes for exciting tournaments. And I'll tell you, one of these days you're going to have a number 1 lose to a number 16. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. And the tournament this year, if I was the number 1 seed, I'd look over my shoulder because there's some good number 16s out there.
Yeah, I would too. I don't. Obviously this is a baseball show, but I think Louisville's got the best shot at winning without a doubt. The way that they played in that Big East tournament was just outstanding. I like the way Ohio State's playing right now. I think they've really got their act together. I don't like Georgetown. I don't like Syracuse. I'm not a big fan of Duke, although they've played a lot better since Kelly's come back. I'll tell you the dark horse team I think that is really going to give people fits, and it's going to be a tough out, is New Mexico under Steve Alford. I've watched them play a couple of times, and they are just an outstanding ball club. They play some tenacious defense.
How about North Carolina as an 8th seed? I mean, they were. I saw them mid-year, and they were playing pretty well. I don't know what happened to them in terms of their record, but I see that team as an 8, and I wonder, wow, that's a pretty strong. I guess they'd have to play a 9, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they do. And I don't have the bracket here in front of me, or I'd tell you who they play. But anyway, I wanted to bring up Shane Larkin, and I think it's just outstanding that it kind of segued right into our bracket contest. But also going on tonight, Mark, is the WBC. Now Puerto Rico is in the finals. The Netherlands just got underway in San Francisco tonight against the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic has not lost a game in this WBC tournament. Many are disappointed in the USA's finish. They didn't make the semifinals, Mark. Were you one of those?
I don't know why people are disappointed. The USA's never done well in this tournament. They've never won it. They've been knocked out, I think, in the second round 2 years. And they just, as I told you before we went on the air, if the U.S. put together truly an all-star team of U.S. players, I think they'd win. But so many players opt out. I mean, Johnny Cueto is an example. Johnny Cueto didn't play this year. But he's with the Dominican team. But a lot of U.S. players have not been on the roster. They beg off. They don't play. Not always the best players show up. So, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of interest. And, when the fans don't care if a team wins, I think it has some impact on the players themselves deciding to play.
No, I agree with you. The only thing nothing disappointed me about the USA's appearance in this tournament. I mean, when you look at who they were beaten by, the Dominican Republic, they were beaten by them in a very close game. They were beaten by Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's in the finals. The Dominican Republic hasn't lost yet. I don't see the Netherlands as beating them in the semifinal game, which means Dominican Republic will be playing Puerto Rico in the championship game. I believe that's tomorrow night. And I just look at it as saying, hey, the major leagues are stocked with Dominican Republic players and Puerto Rican players. And I think the United States, had they been beaten by anybody else other than those two, I'd say, okay, I was a little upset by it. But no, they gave a good showing. I don't think there was anything wrong with what they did.
What's happened, it's very interesting when you look at that sports, basketball, football, baseball. The number of African-American baseball players is unbelievably low. I don't know, I've forgotten the number now, but I think the Reds have one African-American player. And until or unless the inner city kids get back playing baseball, we're going to lose a lot of talent that is turning toward basketball or is turning toward football. And obviously great athletes that baseball ought to go out of their way to try and get these kids back playing baseball again. But it's so much easier to pick up a basketball and go down to the high school and play all day. Working a kid in the inner city, like we used to do, at least certainly I did, each neighborhood had a little baseball field that everybody would show up and play for 10 hours a day. You don't have that anymore. And certainly the cities, none of the big cities have that. So there's just no place for the kid to play unless he plays organized Little League, where he gets 4 at-bats a week and, pitches maybe 2 innings, and that's the extent of it. So I think American baseball can come back, but they have to look at where the talent is, and in many cases, the talent's in the inner cities.
Mark, I really believe the problem is with the parents. I've been involved several years, not so much in the past few years, but when the boys were younger, I was involved with the Little League baseball program in the town that we live in. And when you get involved with other parents, Mark, I remember growing up and being involved in Little League and playing. The season went 4 or 5 months. It went from the middle of May through the end of August. You were playing from the end of one school year through the beginning of the next school year. And you had to have different kids, more than enough kids on your team, because when kids went on vacation, parents went on vacation, you needed somebody to fill that spot. Nowadays, these towns, they try to get these Little League seasons compacted into about a month to a month and a half, 2 months tops. And you can't get kids to play in that kind of a situation. They don't have enough time to learn the fundamentals. And like you said, these ballparks nowadays, kids aren't interested in getting 9, 10, 12, 14 kids together and going out to the ballpark and playing a game of baseball. They're more interested in going to the living room and playing some sort of video game or playing a basketball video game, or even the AAUs in basketball are going on now. So baseball's really going by the wayside in America.
Yeah, and that's why you have so many Latin players that are flourishing in it. And so, again, these organized leagues are not the answer to the kids playing baseball. If you go, I worked in D.C. for a number of years, and I've walked by this basketball. It was a full court. In fact, there was 2 full courts right downtown D.C. 24 hours a day, there were kids playing basketball. 24 hours. You go at 3 in the morning, there'd be games out there. I'm not exaggerating. And that's not the way it is with baseball. You need more equipment in baseball. You need a big field in baseball, and it's not conducive to what we have today. So unless you have a kid who is going to play, he starts when he's 9 years old and plays in college, he's on these elite travel teams, the normal average kid just doesn't have a chance to do that.
Well, moving forward, our guest coming up in just a few minutes is going to be Sean Weaver, who writes for the Cincinnati Reds blog at shawns.blogspot.com. But, Mark, yesterday the Indians and the Reds faced off for the first time since really the first couple of days of spring training when they actually started playing ball games. It ended up being a 7-7 tie yesterday. It was a pretty good outing for the starting pitcher for the Reds, Matt Latos, but it was a terrible one for Josh Masterson. What did you think?
Yeah, I saw him, and boy, he was hanging a lot of breaking balls right in the middle of the plate. I mean, that 3-run home run to Paul was right there. I mean, anybody could have hit that. And even Frazier's was on the inside inner half, but Frazier turned on it. He doesn't seem to me to have the location he had a couple of years ago. That I don't know what his speed is, but yesterday and last year when I saw him pitch 4 or 5 times, and he was right down the middle of the plate on so many pitches, and I saw him get pounded. I mean, maybe I was just seeing, unusual results, but I saw him get pounded 3 or 4 times. I mean, he just got lit up. So I don't know if there's real concern about him, or is it location and velocity and crispness on his breaking ball, or what are you seeing about him?
Well, right now, and we haven't been able to watch a lot of the games because Sports Time Ohio has been in the transition of going to Fox Sports Ohio, which yesterday was actually the first broadcast they had as Sports Time, Fox Sports Ohio, whatever it is you want to call it now, that allowed the Indians ownership to go out and sign Swisher and Bourne. But anyway, so I haven't seen a lot of it, but what I've been understanding and what I've been hearing on the radio and things is that Masterson is not getting his pitches down. He's getting a lot of movement, but his pitches are kind of hanging around belt high. That's the same thing I saw today out of Ubaldo Jimenez. He pitched better. Jimenez seems to be getting better. They seem to be getting through to him as he seems to have compacted his delivery somewhat, and he's cut down on the number of pitches that he's throwing. Now, whether that is just because of the fact that it is spring training and he's trying to just master 2 or 3 pitches, which would be great to go through the rest of the regular season with, I don't know. But the fact is that they're both have to win for the Indians to have a shot at winning this division, and right now they just seem to be working on their location.
Switching to the offense, I saw yesterday Dusty Baker was inquiring about Drew Stubbs, and he was told that Stubbs was still hitting around 200 with, I think, 10 or 12 strikeouts. Anything new on that front? We talked about it last week. He's the kind of guy I really like him to do well. I like Drew Stubbs. Have you seen anything different than we at Cincinnati the last few years?
Actually, to be honest with you, I wanted to bring him up tonight because he has been putting the ball in play an awful lot. As far as strikeouts, yeah, he does have 11 strikeouts on the spring, but his batting average so far is around 250. Now, I know he's going to strike out a lot, Mark. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. But if Stubbs can put the ball in play most of the time and hit 250 for the Indians, I think he's going to stay in right field, and I think it's going to be a successful situation for him.
Well, I think it's going to be a successful situation for the Indians because, man, that outfield, that has to be the best outfield defensively, certainly in the Central Division, maybe the American League.
Well, it could be, although the Indians announcers today brought up the fact that California has got 3 center fielders now playing the outfield, and Josh Hamilton in right, Bourgeois is going to center, and they're moving Trout to the left. So they've got 3 center fielders also in the outfield. So this should prove to be interesting for the rest of the year. But right now we want to invite in to our Ohio Baseball Weekly microphones our guest for tonight, Sean Weaver of the Cincinnati Reds blog, which is at shawns.blogspot.com. Sean, thanks for joining us again. I'm Dave Mitchell along with Mark Donahue. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sean. How you doing?
Doing all right here.
Sean, we were talking a little bit about Drew Stubbs, so let me just bring that up. What should the Indians expect out of Drew Stubbs this year coming over from Cincinnati?
Well, the kid can run, and he can field, and he can hit lefties. Right-handers have been a different story. He has a lot of trouble with that curveball and that slider from a right-hander. So if you can keep him away from some of the tough right-handers, you'll get a pretty decent player.
Hey, Sean, what's your vote? Close or start?
I assume you mean Aroldis.
Yes.
I would like to see him start because no matter what happens, Justin Verlander is still more valuable than Mariano Rivera.
Yeah, assuming that he can become Justin Verlander, I agree with you. But what if, I mean, it's all rumor. I read it now in 2 or 3 different locations, though, that the Reds are looking into Kyle Lohse. Do you think if they were to sign Lohse, that would mean that Aroldis will go back to the bullpen?
I say there's no way in hell, pardon my language, that the Reds sign Kyle Lohse.
Okay. Why do you think that? Just because of his reputation or his stuff, or because he's not going to be that expensive?
Well, actually, I think that's the problem, is Lohse wants a lot of money. Somebody would have signed him by now if he didn't want so much cash. But the Reds have 6 or 7 better starters than Kyle Lohse. They have no reason to sign him.
Well, if that's the case, and they keep Chapman in the rotation, as I hope they do, do you have any concern about Broxton at the back end?
No, Broxton is a perfectly competent reliever, and even if he were to falter or get hurt again like he did a couple of years ago, they've still got a lot of guys they can move into that spot. Sean Marshall had a little trouble last year, but he's perfectly capable of doing it. J.J. Hoover is a young guy who could move into that role. He has a lot of stuff, and I'm sure that, he'll have a little bumpy start. That happens a lot, but he can do the job too.
I agree with you. I'm a big J.J. Hoover fan. I tell you, he has got electric stuff, and I like his physical makeup. He's got big legs. He's got a big butt, and he reminds me of that reliever for the Braves, the guy who was the number 1 reliever last year. I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Craig Kimbrell.
Yeah, Craig Kimbrell. He has that kind of body, and I tell you, I saw him pitch twice down there, and he can bring it.
Yeah, I really like Hoover. I think he's got quite a future. He could be a starter. He's got enough pitches that you could put him in the rotation, but I have a feeling this is going to be a guy they're going to stick with in the bullpen. And I see him as a closer at least a couple years down the line.
Our guest is Sean Weaver. Sean, let me ask you this. Do you think that the Reds and Dusty Baker have to make a decision here, like within the next few days, or do they have time to make a decision on whether or not Chapman will be the closer or a starter?
Well, quite honestly, they have all the time in the world. When you cut yourself off when you put him in the bullpen, because once he starts training to pitch that one inning, you can't go back the other way. You know, you can train to start and then switch to relief right away, but you can't go the other way that quickly. So I'm hoping they keep him in the rotation as long as possible. Now, you know, if Dusty gets his way, he'll be back in the bullpen. But you know, I would really like to see him start because I think he can put up one of those ridiculous records, you know, an 18-5 or something like that.
Well, I'm anxious to see what happens on Thursday with Mark Prior. I know it's a long shot, and it's probably not going to happen, but I lived in Chicago when Mark Prior came up, and what a tragedy that has befallen him. And I would love to see this guy at least make the roster, the 40-man, where he has a chance to pitch again, because he had the most electric stuff I'd ever seen coming up when he was 18 years old. It was incredible how overpowering he was, and I hope the Reds give him a fair shot.
There is a certain amount of irony about Mark Prior and Dusty Baker being together again, but I see Prior going back to the minors for a while, but you know, injuries happen, and if he can get himself on track, I wouldn't be surprised to see him pitching out of the bullpen come mid-season in Cincinnati.
We just had a question come in from one of our listeners. They wanted me to ask you, do you think that this Reds team is a better team right now the way it's constituted than last year's Reds team?
I think this year's edition is a better team than last year, although when I say that, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win more games. I think they played a little over their heads last year and got a little bit lucky, especially when you look at the top of that lineup. They had Stubbs and Cozart in the top two positions most of the time, and those guys did not get on base. It was something of a lucky break that they managed to win 97 games. I thought that was about a 90-win team last year, and things just kind of went their way. I think this year's team is a 95-win team, which usually means that their spread could be anywhere, you know, a normal spread would be 92 to 97. So they could have a better team than last year and win just the same amount of games, or less.
Sean, what about Chris Heisey? Where's he been lately? I mean, we're not seeing or hearing anything out of Heisey lately.
Well, Heisey's actually having a pretty good spring. He's swinging pretty well. He's hitting 300 or so. He's hit a couple of homers. But it's just that he's in that fourth outfielder spot. Now, he's going to spell Chu in center a few times, and certainly Ludwig's not going to play every day in left field, so Heisey will get some time out there. But he's fitting in that fourth outfielder slot. He'll probably get about 250, 300 at-bats this year.
You know, I brought up last week that I was one of the few people that thought Shin-Soo Choo could handle the center field position. What's your gut feeling about Choo playing center this year for the Reds?
I really like his bat. I think that Choo is going to be really stretched in center field, but I think his combination offense-defense is going to be a lot better fit out there playing every day than Drew Stubbs was.
Well, I think what you're going to find, Sean, is that I think Drew Stubbs would be able to cover more ground, obviously, and he's probably got a better glove. But you're going to see that Choo has got a better arm than Stubbs had. I think he'll be pleasantly surprised at the way Choo's going to be able to handle center field.
Yeah, I'm not real worried about it. I think he'll be all right. He just won't get to the balls in the gaps that Stubbs did, and that's all right. Stubbs can really run down some balls in the gaps. I mean, he could make some amazing catches. But you know, if Choo can be an average center fielder, the Reds will be fine.
Yesterday, I heard on the broadcast, I think it was Jeff Rentley and I forget who the other guy was. I think it was Tom Brenneman. They were talking about the development of Hamilton in center field, and he's been a real pleasant surprise that he's apparently adapted to center field much quicker than they thought he would. That's going to have a profound impact on what the Reds do in the off season, because if he's ready to step in, you don't sign Chew to a long-term deal. And if he's not ready, you've got to make some serious decisions, because this kid, he didn't hit very well last year, and you can't steal first base. So this is a big year for the Reds in terms of developing some young players, because after Hamilton, I don't know what you think, Sean, but I don't see that next Jay Bruce out there or next superstar in the making unless I'm overlooking somebody.
No, and that concerns me a little bit, because Hamilton is very exciting, and you hope that he can hit on a major league level, but that's going to be next year, September at the earliest. He's really not ready yet. You can tell that, but the excitement factor is certainly there. But yeah, there is not another outfielder coming up that you can say, okay, this is going to be the next guy who can slot in and be a star. The only other guy they have on the farm who might be coming in the next little bit would be Donald Lutz, the fella out of Germany that they signed a few years ago. But Lutz is a power guy, and he has decent speed for a guy his size. But at best, he's going to be a left fielder. And at this point, they're really just kind of hoping if something goes badly wrong with Ludwig, that they can plug Lutz in and get a little bit of power out of him. But that's really where the fallback position, and that's all they've got.
Go ahead, Mark.
What's your take this year on the rest of the National League Central? I mean, are the Cardinals? I've been really surprised that there's a lot of enthusiasm from some baseball watchers about the Cardinals. Do you think they are the team to beat for the Reds?
I think the Cardinals are definitely the second best team in the Central. But right now, the Cardinals do not have a shortstop. That job is vacant. They're going to try and play Pete Kozma there. And if he can be inhabited by the spirit of Hurricane Bob Hazel like he was last September, then that would be great. But I think they're going to try and play him every day. He's going to hit 220. And defense be a little bit shaky.
I was a little concerned to hear. I heard this last week on a broadcast. I was listening to MLB. I'm not sure which team I was listening to, but they said that the Cardinals were kicking the tires on Elvis Andrus, and I said, "Oh no," because he would really be the missing link for them. And I hate to see him come over to St. Louis, but that's somebody they probably ought to be looking at.
That'd be an interesting trade for him, but I wonder what the Rangers would want in exchange, and I wonder if the Cards would do that. I mean, that's a possibility, but that could be a real big trade.
Yeah.
Well, the Rangers are also having a power struggle out there with Nolan Ryan and their GM and the other owners. There's a real fight going on inside that organization right now, so I would think that they wouldn't be able to come to a meeting of the minds on what they would actually want for him.
Well, the problem is it's his contract. I think he's in his last year of his contract, and they have another young kid at shortstop that they can move in. But I don't know the depth of the Cardinals organization. Who could they offer for that guy? But boy, he's a game changer. If you move him over to St. Louis, he rounds out that lineup very, very nicely. And I hope they don't do that deal.
No, that would be a killer. That would be a killer for the Reds. I mean, that might put St. Louis over the top. Sean, tell me a little bit about what you think Brandon Phillips, after coming back over from playing for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, is he ready to go? Is he going to be more at home batting in the number 2 position than flip-flopping back and forth between first and second?
I think that's the better spot for him, because if you getting Phillips slotted in there between Chew and Votto is a good space, because Phillips gives you a little bit of power, steals some bases, hits for a pretty decent average, and if you get him in just the right spot, he also, not every year, but some years he draws some walks too and puts up a good on-base percentage. So I think he's in a real good spot this year between those two left-handed hitters. So I'm looking for a pretty good year for Brandon.
What's your biggest concern? I won't tell you mine until I hear yours, but you look at the Reds lineup, And where do you see the weakest link offensively on that team?
The thing I'm most worried about is, well, really what we were talking about earlier, the outfield depth. Because if, say, Ludwig goes down for any amount of time, that's going to put a serious crimp in the power and in left field. I mean, if Heisey can step in and have a real big month or two, and if Ludwig went down, then everything would be fine. But Heisey's been so up and down whenever the Reds have tried to put him in the lineup on a more regular basis, and it just hasn't worked out when he's had to take on a bigger role. So I think the thing I'm worried about more than anything else is outfield depth. Because if one of the regular outfielders goes down, if Jay Bruce got hurt and was out for a month or two, I think that would be a big hit.
Yeah, you hit exactly what I was going to say. Wish I could have written it down so I could prove this. But Ryan Ludwig concerns me. He got off to a horrible start last year. Remember, in June he was hitting under 200, and he had a great second half. But, he's an up-and-down guy. He's never been consistent. He's had some good years. But, what is he now, 35, 34? And he's not bad defensively. He catches everything he gets to. But I'm just afraid, not that he would get hurt necessarily, that he's just not going to perform as the Reds are depending on a number 4 hitter to perform. And I just wish, you said it a few minutes ago, I'm a big Heisey fan, but he's so frustrating because, he gets a chance and he doesn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, he's just not all we'd hoped he'd be.
Sean Weaver, our guest. Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot as our final question for this evening. Who's going to win the NCAA basketball tournament?
Oh, that's a good one. This is
on stumpers here.
Yeah, this is a wide open tournament this year. I would say Kansas, but that is more a wild guess than anything.
Well, I was kind of hoping you'd go with Louisville. That would have given us the trifecta tonight. But, okay, I went with Kansas. We'll let you go there. Hey, Sean, tell us about the Red Leg Annual. I mean, everybody can pick it up for $4 at redlegannual.com, but tell us what it is.
Yeah, it's a great little e-magazine. You can get it on your computer. There are about 25 of us, various bloggers from the Cincinnati area. And Joel Luckhopt was our editor and ringleader and gathered up a bunch of us and sent us all out to write some articles and send them back into him. And he compiled it into a little e-magazine. And, well, if you'd like to read some of my stuff, plus Mo Egger and Joel and all kinds of other guys, there's all kinds of stuff in there for just $4.
And that's a redlegannual.com. And matter of fact, Joel's going to be our guest coming up here in just a couple of weeks, so we'll have him talk about it then also. Sean, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your insight on the Cincinnati Reds. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
My pleasure, guys. Let's do it again.
We'll do it. Thanks a lot, Sean. Sean Weaver, our guest here this evening on the Ohio Baseball Weekly Show. He is the Cincinnati Reds blog writer at shawns.blogspot.com. Well, Mark, one thing I want to talk about is Kyle Lohse here. We've been talking mainly about the Reds here tonight, but I'll tell you, the thing that we bring up is this Kyle Lohse rumor, because he's not you guys aren't the only ones that are talking about Kyle Lohse. I've heard it around baseball, especially today, but the big thing about Lohse is any team that signs him has to give up a first-round draft pick. And we saw that was a detriment, especially with Michael Bourn, and that's really how the Indians managed to get him. Do you think that's a detriment to any team that really wants to sign this guy this late in spring training?
It depends. I mean, if it's a first-round pick for a team that finished first place, like the Reds did, the Reds are going to pick 26th or 24th or 25th, something like that. So you're not going to be giving up a whole lot, if you figure your first-round pick is that low in the draft. So I think it makes some sense. But, what happened with Michael Bourn is a lot different than what happened with Kyle Lohse. But even in Bourne's case, his value went down precipitously from the time the season ended last year to when he signed with the Indians. But Kyle Lohse, he way overvalued himself, or his agent did. And now he's a guy in his 30s. I don't know. I think he's 32, 33 maybe. Great arm. and he's always had a great arm, but he's been with probably 5 different teams. And you wonder, is there something above the shoulders that makes him the kind of guy that the Cardinals, who need starting pitching, decided not to sign? And why haven't they signed him now when his price has come down? They could probably sign him for less money now than they offered him during the offseason that he turned down.
And they don't have to give up the first-round pick either, Mark.
That's my point. I mean, they are the team that makes so much sense for him to go back to, and why haven't they done it? So, he had a really good year last year, but he's been terribly inconsistent. When he was with the Reds, it would drive me insane when this guy pitched, because he'd pitch 3 shutout innings, strike out 7 guys, then give up 7 runs in the 4th inning. Like he wouldn't concentrate or couldn't concentrate. He'd walk 4 guys and somebody would double and then a home run, and it's the game's over. So maybe he corrected that, but you told me before the broadcast that you heard on the Indians broadcast that the Reds were at least kicking tires on Kyle Lohse.
Yeah, they were. Toronto is, which Toronto, I'm not quite sure why they're interested in the guy. They've already got a payroll that's out of this world. And the New York Yankees are interested. Now, the Yankees make the most sense to me for Lohse, especially the way that their team is constructed right now and the problems that they've got. They've really got to rely on their pitching coming back, especially the early part of this season when A-Rod is out and Teixeira is out for a while. But Lohse was also rumored to be coming to the Indians, and I really think that the Indians are happy with their pitching. And really the reason I say that, Mark, is today 2 of the pitchers that were minor league signees that are ex-major league players, Daisuke Matsusaka and Matt Capps, both coming off arm injuries, and both have pitched well in spring training. But the problem is that both have had minor injuries. They were told today by the club that they are not going to make the opening day roster. However, the Indians are willing to pay them a bonus. They can't increase their salary because the minor league salaries are set, but they can give them a bonus if they will report to Columbus of the AAA League. Now, Matsusaka's already said he'll do that. Now, Capps was supposed to be making a decision, and I just got a clip here just a few seconds ago that said that he is really considering going to Columbus. I think they're happy with their pitching staff, and Scott Kazmier's still involved in this whole rotation. I think he's got a shot at being number 5.
Yeah, he's your Mark Prior, I guess. You just pull for the guy. You hope he can come back and make it, just like Mark Prior. But with the starting pitcher like Lohse, don't forget he's not had spring training. So even if he signs tomorrow with somebody, he's not going to be ready to pitch. Multiple innings probably until the beginning of May.
Well, maybe he'll be the new Roy Oswalt or Roger Clemens, and he'll just show up in the middle of July and decide to pitch.
Well, Andy Pettitte was the only guy I recall that really pulled that off well. And it's amazing. Pettitte now, after he retired twice, is saying he wants a 2 or 3 year contract now. So maybe the home life wasn't all he thought it was going to be cracked up to be.
Yeah, really. Hey, a couple of other house cleaning items with the Indians so far before we get into a couple of other things. Chris Perez appears to be ahead of schedule. He's begun throwing today. He threw a bullpen session. They said they're going to check out his arm tomorrow. Of course, he's coming off of that strained shoulder. He hasn't pitched for a couple of weeks. But he said after the throwing session he felt pretty good, so he seems to be ready to go. And also, the Indians, through the grapevine we're hearing, they are discussing contract extensions with not only Michael Brantley but also Jason Kipnis, their second baseman. So that's good news. Maybe the Dolan brothers are starting to take a clue, a cue from, I should say, from the previous regime, the Jacobs brothers and John Hart. But now it's time, Mark, for us to go to our listeners for our Ask Us segment, where they're going to be giving us some questions. And I guess the first question that I want to ask you, let's talk about the Reds first of all, is the Redlegs writes into us, Mark, and he says he's having a hard time buying that this team is a legit World Series contender in October. He wants to know, he wants you to tell him, Mark, what is he missing? Because they seem like they're the same team with a worse center fielder but a better leadoff guy and Chapman in the rotation. What's changed?
Well, let me turn that question around and ask our listener, what are the Reds missing? Because if you look up and down that lineup offensively, there's not a weak bat in it, number one. And number two, they have probably the best starting pitching. Particularly if Chapman's in the starting rotation, they have probably the best starting pitching in the National League. If he goes to the bullpen, they have the best bullpen in the National League and still a pretty good staff. They've got speed, and you're right, they may have given up a bit on defense in center field, but don't forget where they play. Great American Ballpark is one of the smallest outfields in baseball. So there's not the kind of ground to cover that you would have, say, at one of the West Coast teams out in San Diego or Arizona. So I think Chu's going to do fine out there. Will he catch everything that Drew Stubbs caught? I don't think so, but Drew Stubbs made up for a lot of bad routes. I mean, I've seen that guy just outrun his mistakes. I mean, he was a great he had great speed in center field, but technically, he was not a great center fielder. I actually think that Chu probably has better instincts in the outfield. He doesn't have a speed, but I just don't think the Reds have a weakness this year that would cause anybody to have concern that they're not going to be competitive. And I really do think that with their pitching, they're going to make it back to the playoffs, and I think they're going to be in the World Series.
Jeffrey asked me tonight, what do I think is the number one thing that Terry Francona has brought to the Indians? And I think that's an easy one-word answer, attitude. He has just come into this ball club, and he has just infused it with a positive attitude and excitement that I haven't seen in this ball club since probably the 2000-2001 season, when Charlie Manuel took over for Mike Hargrove as manager. I think Terry Francona was an excellent choice. He's excited about being in Cleveland, and I think he's just brought a tremendous attitude to this ball club. Mark, one question that we've also gotten here from Crazy32 is, and I asked our guest Sean Weaver this question, but I'm going to ask you also, where do you think Chris Heisey fits in?
I think Chris Heisey, I mean, we had to write some of these predictions down. I have a feeling that he is going to end up being the Reds' regular left fielder this year. I don't know why. I'm not wishing anything bad to happen to Ludwig at all. But I don't think Ludwig is the guy that you can depend on to have the kind of year he had last year. And if he gets off to a slow start again, and again, I mentioned earlier, he was hitting under 200 in June. And if Heisey's going to get a shot, and I just think the Reds are a better team with Heisey in left field. He's better defensively. He's got a better arm. He's faster. He's got power. And I just hope if he gets his chance, he doesn't blow it again this year.
Well, Random Indians fan writes in and asks me, why did the Indians cut Ben Francisco? The reason the Indians cut Ben Francisco is because they've got a glut of outfielders right now, and the way Ryan Rayburn was playing, there just was no way that they could cut the guy. The guy's hitting .425 in spring training. Yeah, Francisco was immediately picked up by the New York Yankees, but Ryan Rayburn would have been picked up probably by the New York Yankees had he been cut instead of Francisco. I think you know exactly what you're going to get out of Ben Francisco, and Rayburn is a lot younger, and the way he's tearing the cover off the baseball right now, I think they had to keep him. But also, Mark, the final question we've got on our Ask Us segment tonight comes from Robbie, and he takes umbrage on me for a comment that you made last week about Robbie Alomar, basically taking Robbie out of the discussion as one of the best second basemen to play the game. He wants to know, where's my Indians loyalty? Why didn't I back up my guy? Well, I'm here to tell you right now, you and I have had this discussion before. I think Robbie Alomar is the best second baseman to ever play the game of baseball. Period.
Well, you're smoking dope.
No one knows what I'm doing behind this microphone.
No. The discussion last week was who was the most valuable second baseman, and my argument was Joe Morgan was. Now, you and I have had the discussion who was the better defensive second baseman. Forget offense for a second. Was it Robbie Alomar or Brandon Phillips? Now, you saw Robbie Alomar play more than I did. I have seen Brandon Phillips play more than you have. Brandon Phillips is the best second baseman I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody cover the ground that Brandon Phillips does and gets to balls that I've never seen anybody else come close to. He'll get to them and throw the guy out. Now, you can argue for Alomar, and you've got a good argument. But I still think if you add everything up for a second baseman, Joe Morgan is more valuable than Brandon Phillips or Robbie Alomar. And I'm going to stick to it.
Well, I would have a tough time saying that Joe Morgan was more valuable to the Big Red Machine than Robbie Alomar was to the Toronto Blue Jays during that time. They both batted third. They both played second base. They both hit for power during that period of time. They both won 2 World Series championships. The only thing that you and I discussed earlier was the fact that, Joe won the Most Valuable Player awards. Robbie didn't. But that was, I guess you could say that was because back then there were a lot more stars, although now that I say that, there were a lot more stars on the Reds too. I just have a tough time saying that Joe, I think the body of work, and I hate that phrase, but I'm going to use it, the body of work that Robbie had throughout his entire career was more exemplary than Joe Morgan. But don't get me wrong, I am a big Joe Morgan fan. I love the guy. And with Brandon Phillips, I'm not going to disagree or agree with you. I'm going to stay ambivalent as far as the defense is concerned. But you know what? Brandon Phillips is a second baseman playing with a shortstop's arm. And he is just fantastic there.
In our mutual defense, talking about defense, I saw a statistic the other day that they rated the top second baseman. I don't know if it's been the last 50 years or 100 years or whenever they've been doing these matrices on defense. But guess who was the best defensive second baseman? And again, I don't know the time period, but it was like 50 years. And they broke it down. Tell me if you can think who the number one defensive second baseman was.
Bill Mazeroski.
Not even close. He wasn't even in the top 25. This is a relatively recent player, and he played for the Reds, and he was adjudged the best defensive second baseman over whatever era they were measuring.
Well, the only name that comes to mind right now is Tommy Helms.
Pokey Reese.
Pokey Reese.
And he was the guy who came up as a shortstop.
Yep.
And that's what makes a great second baseman, because very, very few players come through the minor leagues as second baseman. They come through as shortstops, and they are moved to second base. And that's why when you have a guy with a cannon arm like Brandon Phillips has, I mean, Brandon Phillips had a great arm from shortstop, much less from second base. So that was a very interesting statistic, and they used this WAR, WAR effect on, I guess, wins above replacement. And Pokey Reese was adjudged the best defensive second baseman.
Well, one of the greatest moves Eric Wedge ever made as manager of the Indians was when they brought up Asdrubal Cabrera, they moved him to second base so they could continue playing Johnny Peralta at short. That made a lot of sense.
And they traded Brandon Phillips.
Yeah, and that was because Eric Wedge couldn't get along with him.
Yeah, he's about the easiest going guy in the world. I mean, really easy going guy. Hey, before we get off, I want to answer my trivia question.
Yes.
What time of year is there no baseball, no football, no basketball, no football, no hockey, no college baseball, nothing? You want to give one more guess?
I'm thinking here, and I would say it is November.
It's the 4 days after the Major League Baseball All-Star break.
That's a trick question.
What do you mean it's a trick question?
Come on. The
couldn't
season's
figure it
going
out.
on. I thought you were talking about seasons.
You couldn't figure it out. Now, you know every season has a sport. I said it's 3 or 4 days, which there is no major sport. See, you don't get it right, and you immediately default to trick question.
It was a trick question.
I wondered if anybody else got the answer.
Hey, you want to talk about tricks? I'm sitting here while we're doing this broadcast, Mark, and I'm watching the Netherlands play the Dominican Republic. And I don't know if you're doing the same thing, but a couple innings ago, the guy for the Dominican Republic ran over and caught a foul ball in the stands down the left field line. And, Mark, it wasn't more than 2 minutes later they showed the play from the Chicago Cubs playoff game where the guy interfered with Moises Alou in left field. Are they ever going to let that go?
Poor Steve Bartman. He'll live in infamy. I mean,
this poor guy. Yeah. Amazing. Hey, I wanted to bring this up last week. We didn't have time on the schedule, but I'm going to bring it up tonight. For anyone who thinks that the first month of this season really isn't that important, let me share with you the Reds' schedule in April. They're going to open with the Los Angeles Angels, probably the prohibitive favorite to win not only the West, but maybe even the American League. Then they play the Washington Nationals, the prohibitive favorite to win the Eastern Division. Then they go to their two main rivals in the Central Division, St. Louis and Pittsburgh. Then they come home to Philadelphia, the Marlins and Cubs. They finally get a breather with the Marlins and Cubs. You never get a breather when you're playing the Phillies, especially with that pitching staff. And then they finish the month again at Washington and with the Cardinals. This is a month in April that the Reds have to be on their game, I think, Mark.
I said earlier this year to some friends that if the Reds can play 500 baseball in April, they're going to win the division by 10 games. Because you're absolutely right. That is the most grueling schedule, and if they come through that schedule and they have a winning record, look out. I mean, they're gonna do some damage this year. But honestly, David, that they could come out of April, down 6 or 7 games, because if they were to lose to the Cardinals, they play 5 games in April against the Cardinals, and the 6th game May 1st. By May 1, they could be 6 or 7 games behind, and it's going to be a long year.
Yeah, they've really got to be coming out of spring training ready to go, and there's only 2 more weeks left to go in spring training. So, Mark, what do the Reds want to accomplish over these next 2 weeks getting ready for April?
Well, it's all about pitching now. They'll make the decision about Chapman, I would say, this week, and at that point they're going to have their rotation down. And Sean was absolutely right. It will be easy to move Chapman to the bullpen if they decide to do that. But I tell you what, I'm not going to put bet against Walt Jocketty pulling off a trade for a starter, because if they do move him back to the bullpen and they can bring in a 5th starter that would be better than Leake, and that wouldn't be too difficult after what he did last year, or even bring Cingrani into that spot. I tell you, they're going to be tough to beat. They're with that pitching staff. But boy, if they were to bring in a true number, 3 or 4 pitcher and put him at number 5, the Reds could do some real damage this year.
Well, the Indians right now, what they're looking at is just trying to get their team back together. Carlos Santana and Mike Aviles are still playing for the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, respectively. So they're waiting to get those 2 guys back. But today they played Milwaukee with virtually their entire starting lineup intact except for Santana. Now they've got to get their pitching set. When Perez comes back, they can get him worked back into that closer role. And the Reds and Indians only play one more time against each other, Mark, and that's on March 30th, the very last spring training game.
Yeah, just before we go, I wanted to get your take. I mean, from what I see, and you're much closer to it than I, this is the best Indians team I have seen in probably 6 or 7 years. You disagree with that?
No, not at all. I agree totally. I think it's probably the best Indians team that they have had since at least 2007. And before that, you would have to go all the way back to 2000, 2001 that the team was this good.
Well, if they fail, it's all your fault.
Well, I've got big shoulders. You know, and one thing is for sure, Mark, if they fail, I'm blaming the Dolans, so it doesn't matter. Mark, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again next Monday night. How's that?
Okay, Dave. Good night.
All right. That's it for our show this evening, everyone. We do want to tell you one more time, where did I put this sheet? It's right here, that we are having the first annual NCAA Bracket Challenge on UltimateSportsTalk.com. So sign up for your spot in the challenge by going straight to our website at www.ultimatesportstalk.com, clicking on the March Madness logo. Remember to use our group code UST when signing up and making your picks. You can sign up for a $50 gift card and a book, Last at Bat, by our resident Reds expert, the author, Mark Donahue. Well, next week we hope to have as our guest the new Reds beat writer, Trent Rosencrans, for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And coming up in just a couple of weeks, Mark and I will be on at 8 o'clock on the Ohio Baseball Weekly Show. Make that note of that, 8 o'clock, because of the national championship game for the NCAA. And we will be back on next Monday night at 8 o'clock. Join me on Thursday night on Blog Talk Radio for the BBA Baseball Talk Show with Dave Mitchell. Until next week, next Monday night at 9 o'clock, I am Dave Mitchell for Mark Donahue. Our thanks to Sean Weaver for being our guest. Good night, everyone.